I'm Roy Lee Lindsay with the North Carolina Pork Council, and I want everyone to remember bacon makes everything better.
Hi again, friends. Welcome to This Week in College Football with David Glenn, brought to you by the North Carolina Pork Council, and thank you so much for joining us again this year. I'm Chris Edwards, happy to be back with David for year 2 of our quickly growing North Carolina Sports Network. On the weekly show here in 2024, DG and I will, for the most part, look ahead at this week's upcoming college football matchups. We're also going to discuss college football's biggest headlines and take a quick glance back with some of DG's expert analysis on the bigger games and developments from the previous week around college football. Great to be back with DG, who's in his 38th year covering college football, both here in North Carolina and around the Atlantic Coast Conference as a whole. He's a longtime member of the Football Writers Association of America and is among the few in North Carolina history who've been honored as both a writer and broadcaster with multiple wins as the North Carolina Sportscaster of the Year. DG, great to see you. Great to be back with you, my friend.
Hey, it is great to see you, Chris, and a special thank you to you for continuing to bring your wide variety of talents and, of course, your professionalism always to the North Carolina Sports Network. As the guy who launched this concept last year with my good friend and business partner, Mike Waddell, who is not on screen with us at the moment, I also just want to share quickly as you and I dive in that we are really excited and thankful for our year 1 growth. Just one example for everybody watching or listening. About 98% of new YouTube channels never make it to 10,000 subscribers or more. And yet we got there in about 3 months. And as we speak, we're about to surpass 16,000 subscribers. So we went flying past that hard to reach threshold, and we're setting new records all the time. Quick reminder to everybody, it is free to subscribe. It is free to follow on YouTube and otherwise. But we just want to extend our special thanks to those 16,000 plus folks and counting on YouTube, and really to about 1 million plus who enjoyed our content on a wider variety of platforms this past year. Y'all have really helped our new company get off the ground in a fashion that was both beyond our original projections and, to be candid, even beyond our wildest dreams. So thank you to everybody as Chris and I dive into this college football action.
All right, let's dive in. Only a handful of games were played in week 0. So let's start with our big picture. What's new in college football? This segment brought to you by our good friends at Atlantic Tire and Service. That's where DG and his family take all of their vehicles for routine maintenance, service needs, world-class selection of new tires. Atlantic Tire and Service, your one-stop tire and auto repair provider with highly trained technicians and a sales and support staff that are really second to none. They've got 6 Triangle area locations, 2 in Raleigh, 2 in Cary, 1 in Durham, and 1 in Wake Forest. You can learn more at AtlanticTireOnline.com. All right, DG, I'm going to give you a category. You give me a quick thought. Let's start with the expanded college football playoffs. Now 12 teams are going to have a shot to win a national title.
Yeah, I know there are a lot of traditionalists, Chris, who do not like this change. That's usually the case, but I'm excited about it. And I just want to remind everyone of some positives. First, and maybe most importantly, the college football season will be more interesting and have more intriguing angles for a longer period than in the past because more teams will still matter in the playoff picture by the time we get to November and December. With the 4-team playoff and its predecessors, any team that lost twice, whether in September or otherwise, was essentially dead in terms of the national championship picture. And the conversation quickly dwindled to the top 7 or 8 contenders for those 4 spots. Well, now you know that if you're a Power 4 conference team and you can get to 10 wins, you'll have a pretty good chance to make this version of the playoff, even though you lost twice. Now, there are going to be 12, maybe 20 teams that enter November with their playoff dreams still alive. And also closer to home, because these rules require that the 5 highest ranked conference champions will make this new playoff, it opens the door in the dream scenario for an App State or someone else in the Sun Belt Conference, for an East Carolina or someone else in the American Athletic Conference. Those 2 leagues, remember, have often been ranked 5th and 6th behind what we currently call the Power 4 in recent years in the sport of football. And that means that if you win that league, you have at least a shot of being included in the 12-team playoff format. It was nearly impossible, not quite, but almost, for a group of 5 team to make the 4-team version of the playoff. Now it's guaranteed that at least one group of 5 team is going to make the 12-team playoff. And I just think that's another thing that makes this new format more fun.
All right, you talk about traditionalists, you talk about Power 4, group of 5. Well, conference realignment has put a monkey wrench into all of it. And now in the All-Coast Conference, we embark on year 1 of the ACC, SMU, Stanford, and Cal, all in the ACC this year.
Yeah, I will not give you this quiz on the spot. I know you would do well, Chris. But even though you and I know we have a lot of smart and knowledgeable readers and viewers and listeners and subscribers and followers on the topic of college football, I'm not sure how many of those fine folks could match the highest profile schools even with their respective conferences right now. Quick reminder, ACC, as you said, Cal, SMU, and Stanford are now a part of it. It's a 17-team football league. SEC welcomes Oklahoma and Texas, a 16-team league now. The Big Ten says hello to Oregon, Southern Cal, UCLA, and Washington. That is an 18-team league now. And the Big 12 now includes Arizona, Arizona State, BYU, and Colorado. It is a 16-team league. In all likelihood, at some point, the Big Ten and the SEC, as by far those 2 wealthiest leagues with football TV money leading the way, they're going to get bigger, although we're going to leave those details for another day. One negative about realignment is that it is simply statistically harder to win a conference title, just numerically, if you're in, say, a 16 or 18-team league than if in the old days you were in an 8 or 9-team conference. We're in a state, remember, Chris, where NC State hasn't won the ACC football title since 1979, Carolina since 1980, Duke since 1989, and Wake Forest only 1 time since 1970. Now, one in-state positive about realignment, because I'm a glass half full kind of guy, I think it opens the door for East Carolina in the American Athletic Conference, because last year's champion in that league, SMU, now in the ACC. 3 other relatively recent American champions, Central Florida, Cincinnati, and Houston. Obviously, they previously relocated to the Big 12. I know and have not forgotten that the Pirates went 2-10 last year. However, there's a chance. The door is cracked. I also realize Memphis and Tulane and others can be really good in the current variation of that league right now. But in the longer run, there is no reason that ECU, with that football fan base and that stadium at Dowdy-Ficklen, no reason they cannot make a run at being one of the best programs in the American Athletic Conference on a pretty consistent basis.
All right, we've got a lot of new head coaches around the ACC and around North Carolina this year too.
Yeah, quickly, nationally, in terms of what's new, it's just going to be weird that Nick Saban has retired at Alabama and Jim Harbaugh left Michigan to return to the NFL. I mean, their departures mean that there's only 3 active college coaches who have won an FBS-level national title. You have Kirby Smart at Georgia, of course, and then 2 others in the ACC, Dabo Swinney at Clemson, Mack Brown at North Carolina. He won his, of course, with the Texas Longhorns. We'll see how Kalen DeBoer, formerly the head coach at Fresno State in Washington, we'll see how he does with the Crimson Tide, who won it all, remember, 6 times in the last 15 years under Nick Saban. And we'll see how the promoted from within offensive coordinator Sherrone Moore will do with the Wolverines, who, of course, won it all last year under Harbaugh. Closer to home, as you mentioned, the new head coaching faces are led by Manny Diaz at Duke, whose only previous head coaching tenure was 3 years with the Miami Hurricanes, and that ended poorly, but who more recently was a really outstanding defensive coordinator at Penn State. Diaz succeeds Mike Elko, who left Duke for Texas A&M after only 2 seasons in Durham. And also quick shout-outs to 2 brand new FCS head coaches here in North Carolina. We have 7 FBS programs. We have 7 FCS programs here. 2 of the latter have new head coaches. It's Braxton Harris at Campbell, who is succeeding the fired former Carolina Panthers star Mike Minter. And it's Chris Reisert at Gardner-Webb, who follows a tough act to follow in Trey Lamb. Lamb took the Running Bulldogs to back-to-back FCS playoff appearances these last 2 years before leaving to take that East Tennessee State job last November. So welcome to the new guys. As always, you and I will talk later this season more about any FCS or D2 or D3 programs that leave a mark on the map. They will make it here to This Week in College Football.
All right, what about the new quarterbacks that might be around the ACC and the state this year?
Yeah, this sounds crazy, but at least 9 of the 17 starting quarterbacks in the ACC will be new guys. Put that in air quotes because, I mean, they're new starters for their current teams, even though some of them are incoming transfers who were starters at their previous schools. And get this, here in North Carolina, all 7 FBS programs are expected to start a transfer at quarterback starting this week. So at App State, now that guy is a returning starter, but Joey Aguilar, a guy we talked a lot about on our show last year, he signed with the Mountaineers originally as a junior college transfer, helped App State to that 9-5 record last season. He recently, Aguilar, was named the 2024 preseason Offensive Player of the Year for the entire Sun Belt Conference. So obviously there are sky-high expectations for him. The other 6 projected starters at in-state FBS programs are all guys who arrived on their new campus this calendar year as major college transfers. It's Grayson McCall at NC State, 3-time Sun Belt Conference Player of the Year at Coastal Carolina. It's Max Johnson at UNC. He arrived from Texas A&M, but actually had his best days prior to that with the LSU Tigers. It's Malik Murphy at Duke, who went 2-0 as a starter last year for a Texas team that ended up, remember, in the college football playoff. But he was caught behind both Quinn Ewers and Arch Manning, pretty famous guy, even as a young player on the Longhorns depth chart. So he's in Durham now, Malik Murphy. Hank Bachmeier at Wake Forest. He spent 4 years at Boise State. Last year, he was the starter at Louisiana Tech, now working with Dave Clawson and the Demon Deacons. Jake Garcia is at East Carolina. He arrives from Missouri, but he previously played for the Miami Hurricanes in the ACC. And it's Max Brown at Charlotte, who was a backup for the Florida Gators last season. That is a lot of new quarterback faces. That is a lot of major college transfers, and we'll be watching them, all of them, at the most important position on the field this fall.
All right, as our listeners and fans go out there and watch week 1 of the college football season, are they going to notice any new rule changes at the stadium this year?
Yeah, we'll probably get used to these things pretty quickly, but here in week 1, it's probably worth reminding everyone that college football does have a 2-minute warning now at the end of the second quarter and at the end of the fourth quarter, just like in the NFL. Also, there are 2 very big technology changes, which are also patterned after the way they do things in the National Football League. One is in-game video, which just means that both coaching staffs and both bench areas are going to have on each side 18 active tablets that include recordings from 3 different video angles of every play that has occurred in that ongoing game. So there's no archival stuff. It's just video of what has happened in the game that is continuing to unfold. The other huge change is called coach-to-player communication. This means one offensive player, one defensive player will be able to hear through their helmets their own coaches in between plays. It is not two-way communication, so the players are not saying anything to the coaches. It's the coaches communicating to one and only one player on each unit. As in the NFL, there is a cutoff switch so that the one-way communication does end either with 15 seconds remaining on the play clock or at the snap of the football, whichever comes first. There's going to be, for viewers, a green sticker on the back of the helmet of whichever player. Usually it's the quarterback, almost always the quarterback on offense. Typically it's going to be a linebacker or maybe a play calling safety on defense. Only one guy at any given time can be chosen by the coaching staff to receive those coach-to-player communications. But those are two pretty big technology changes and one pretty big clock management change in college football this year.
All right, we're up against the timeout. We'll have more of This Week in College Football with David Glenn, brought to you by the North Carolina Port Council. That's coming up in just a moment right here on the North Carolina Sports Network.
In sports, we talk a lot about impact players who make a positive difference. When it comes to our state's economy, the North Carolina pork industry is a true MVP. Each year, the pork industry plays an important role in supporting rural communities across our state. It contributes more than $10 billion a year to the North Carolina economy and supports more than 44,000 jobs. Learn more about their positive impact at ncpork.org. The North Carolina Pork Council, the foundational partner of the North Carolina Sports Network.
Welcome back to This Week in College Football with David Glenn, brought to you by the North Carolina Port Council. I'm Chris Edwards. Okay, DG, let's dive into our State of North Carolina Week 1 look ahead. That's brought to you by our good friends at Lawson Insurance, who are about to celebrate their 50th anniversary of helping DG and many other North Carolina citizens and businesses with their personal and commercial insurance needs. You can reach out to the brothers, Ken Miller and Michael Lawson. Like us, they're huge sport fans, and you can give them a call, 919-846-2090, or by searching Lawson Insurance online. Okay, DG, here we go. I'll mention a game, and you tell me what's most important or most worth watching about these games. We'll start with the North Carolina Tar Heels. They're on the road at Minnesota, nationally televised game, one of the few Power 4 versus Power 4 matchups. That's Thursday, 8 p.m. on Fox.
Yeah, we covered this matchup, Chris, remember when it was played in Chapel Hill last year. And whereas the final score made it look like the Tar Heels just walloped the Golden Gophers 31-13, in my opinion, and I believe we discussed this as a group, there was only one massive difference between the two teams last year, and that was at quarterback. UNC had Drake May. Minnesota did not have anybody who could make a play from that position with his arm or his legs. Obviously, everyone, including us, will be watching the new Carolina QBs with the transfer Max Johnson, the probable starter, and maybe we'll see the backup Connor Harrell as well. However, to me, the biggest unpredictable variable in this game is actually the biggest unpredictable variable in the Tar Heels' entire season, and it's not quarterback, and it ranks among the biggest unpredictable variables for any team in the ACC this year. It is the offensive line at Carolina. Listen to this. Last year, Carolina had one of the most productive and well-balanced offenses in the ACC. Number 1 in total offense, number 2 in scoring offense in the conference because of May, because of running back Omarion Hampton, because of the sensational wideout Tez Walker once he became eligible. And the Tar Heels also had outstanding tight ends last year and again this year. But they also last year had 4 very experienced offensive linemen, several of whom, seriously, were 24 or 25 years old and in their 3rd or 4th years as starters at the college level and in their 5th and 6th year as college football players. That's a lot of experience. This year, the Heels do have all ACC guard Willie Lampkin back, and they have absolutely nobody else of significance back on the offensive line. At Minnesota, Chris, Carolina will be starting 4 offensive linemen who have never started a college football game. And I'm not sure that I have ever, in those 38 years you mentioned, seen that from an ACC team in a season opener. There are times where injuries happen and weird stuff happens, and later in the year, maybe you're throwing out a bunch of fresh faces. It is happening to the Tar Heels as they trot out for the opening snap against the Golden Gophers. There is not a person on the planet, this show, Carolina locker room or otherwise, who really knows which way that offensive line is going to go, either against Minnesota this week or down the road for that matter. But it is absolutely, positively the key to the 2024 season for UNC.
All right, what about number 24, NC State? They're opening up at Carter Finley Stadium against FCS opponent Western Carolina Thursday at 7 p.m. on ACC Network.
Well, this is fun. Nobody in the state of North Carolina hit the transfer portal in a more impressive fashion than Dave Doran and NC State this past season. It's not only Grayson McCall at quarterback, who we'll talk a lot about. It's all ACC running back Jordan Waters coming over from Duke. It's a starting center named Zeke Correll. That's a scary position to fill for a lot of coaches. He was the starter for the last 3 years at Notre Dame. So that's a pretty proven commodity that you're plugging in right in front of Grayson McCall. It's tight end Justin Jolly from UConn, who was one of the best pass-catching tight ends in the entire country last year. It's wide receiver Noah Rogers. He was a 4-star high school prospect from Rollsville High near Raleigh. He redshirted last year at Ohio State. A lot of talented players for the Buckeyes. But he may, Noah Rogers, start right away for the Wolfpack, even as a redshirt freshman. Obviously, on defense, there's no more Peyton Wilson at NC State, one of the best players in Wolfpack history. But on that side of the ball, they still have Davin Vann on the line. They still have Sean Brown at linebacker. They still have Aiden White at cornerback and a bunch of other good players. They'll be too much for the Catamounts, but I'll be watching a lot of those new faces on offense and then those stalwarts on defense on Thursday night.
What about Wake Forest? They're also hosting an FCS opponent. They're taking on North Carolina A&T, also Thursday night, 7 p.m., ACC Network Extra or ESPN+.
Yeah, I don't think it's a great possibility that the Demon Deacons will be a special team this year. They, too, lost significant amounts in the transfer portal. But Dave Clawson is one of the best and smartest coaches I've come across in the ACC over all these years. And I think he is going to bounce back from last year's 4-8 disappointment. Remember, he's the same guy who led the Deacs to a school record 7 consecutive bowl games before last year's drop-off. I think they have a chance to be a bowl team this year, and it's mainly because of their offense at Wake Forest. They have a chance to have a really good offensive line, and I'm curious about the new quarterback. This is a theme all year long. Hank Bachmeier spent 4 years at Boise State, including some starting time there. And then he was the full-time starter last year at Louisiana Tech. It wasn't a great Louisiana Tech team, but he has shown great promise. And if anybody's going to get the best out of that transfer, I think Dave Clawson can be that guy.
We talked about Manny Diaz a little bit earlier. His Blue Devils are at home to open the season on Friday night, taking on FCS opponent Elon. That's a 7:30 start on ACC Network.
Yeah, we'll be watching Malik Murphy, the Texas transfer that I mentioned earlier. I stood next to him at the ACC kickoff event in one of our interviews. He's a big boy. He's about 6'5", 230 or so pounds, although he said he's trying to slim down a little bit. He's not a running quarterback, but he's not yet a polished pocket passer yet. He's going to be one of the least experienced starters in the entire ACC this year. Again, only 2 starts with the Longhorns under his belt. He's also only a redshirt sophomore in an era where we're seeing, and this is not an exaggeration, 5th-year seniors, 6th-year seniors, and yes, 7th-year seniors starting at other ACC schools. So again, we'll watch quarterback. But I need to remind Duke and other ACC fans, nobody in the Atlantic Coast Conference got hit harder by the outgoing transfer portal than Duke did. It is not Manny Diaz's fault as the new head coach. It's just what happened during that gap between Mike Elko's departure for the Texas A&M job and Diaz being hired away from Penn State to take the job in Durham. Riley Leonard, Duke quarterback, is now at Notre Dame. Jordan Waters, I mentioned, left Duke for NC State. Great safety Brandon Johnson is now at Oregon. Great defensive lineman Aeneas Peebles is now at Virginia Tech. Very good defensive end RJ Oben is at Notre Dame. These aren't just other schools, right? If you land at Notre Dame, NC State, Oregon, Virginia Tech, and Notre Dame a second time, that means Duke lost some serious talent. That was an outgoing exodus, and I think it's going to make it very hard for the Blue Devils to be a bowl team in year 1 under Manny Diaz here in 2024.
Appalachian State at home this week. They'll host FCS opponent East Tennessee State. That's a 3:30 kick on Saturday on ESPN+.
Yeah, App has a chance to be really, really good again for Coach Sean Clark, who's now in his 4th full season as the head coach of the Mountaineers. He has much deeper roots, of course, in Boone. And he's taken them to 2 of the last 3 Sun Belt Conference championship games. Aguilar, we mentioned earlier, fun to watch at QB, preseason player of the year in that league on the offensive side. But this team also includes Kanye Roberts at running back, Caden Robinson at wide receiver, Eli Wilson at tight end, Santana Hopper on the defensive line, Nate Johnson at linebacker, Jordan Favors and Ethan Johnson in the secondary. Their clutch kicker, Michael Hughes, is back as well. And there's a bunch of other impressive talent. That's why the Mountaineers were voted in the preseason to represent their division in the Sun Belt Conference championship game once again. East Tennessee State is not going to be a problem for the Mountaineers. The sky is limit for Sean Clark and this year's app team.
East Carolina opens up their season against FCS opponent Norfolk State. That's Saturday at 6 p.m. from Greenville on ESPN+.
Yeah, and ECU was horrible offensively last year, right? And if you're Jake Garcia, their projected starter at quarterback, you were good enough to the Miami Hurricanes, for the Miami Hurricanes to sign you out of high school. You were good enough, your talent level, to catch the eye of an offensive guru like Eli Drinkwitz, now the head coach at Missouri of the SEC. Garcia is in Greenville now. We know Mike Houston, the head coach there, somebody who we respect for his great success at many different coaching stops as a head coach, high school, college, and now in Greenville. He desperately needs to rebound from last year's horrific 2-10 season, because this is year 6 for him in Greenville, and you get less benefit of the doubt when you've been there for 5 or 6 years. The defense, remember, at ECU was not bad a year ago. It was the Pirates' offense that was absolutely atrocious. And with Norfolk State providing the opponent this week, it is the perfect opportunity for that new offense with a new quarterback, under new coordinator John David Baker, who was a co-OC for some explosive offenses at Ole Miss these last 2 years in the SEC. Perfect opportunity for that offense to gain some confidence here in week 1 against Norfolk State on Saturday night.
And then DG, Charlotte hosting James Madison. That's Saturday at 8, nationally televised game on ESPNU.
Yeah, good for the 49ers getting a little TV window there. Again, quarterback, new guy, Max Brown. He was with the Florida Gators last year. The 49ers offense desperately needed a jolt, and maybe he's going to be able to provide it. Quick reminder, the head coach at Charlotte is Biff Poggi. He was a legendary high school coach in Maryland back in the late 1990s and all the way through 2015 before spending some time on Jim Harbaugh's staff at Michigan. The Niners were only 3-9 last season in Coach Poggi's first year in Charlotte. James Madison obviously provides like a brutally difficult opener. A lot of these other teams that we follow have so-called cupcakes. Not all of them, but most of them. Not the case for Charlotte, even at home against JMU. It's going to be difficult to get a win right out of the gate.
All right, we've talked about all 7 of our FBS programs here in North Carolina. Are there other week 1 games involving in-state teams that you've got your attention on this week?
Yeah, let's just give a quick shout out to NC Central. The Eagles are going to be on national TV on Sunday afternoon, when they visit Alabama State, 3 o'clock on ESPN proper. Now, Coach Trey Oliver already has led the Eagles to an HBCU national championship a few years ago, so they have been in the spotlight before, but this gives them an incredible moment in the sun, so to speak. ESPN, Sunday afternoon, 3 o'clock, especially with the Sunday afternoon game before the NFL starts its schedule, which is later in September. That's a heck of an opportunity for the Eagles to expand their brand, so to speak, against Alabama State.
All right, let's take another break. We'll come back and have more of This Week in College Football with David Glenn, presented by our friends at the North Carolina Port Council. That's coming up in a moment right here on the North Carolina Sports Network.
I am a better person and a more effective business owner for having known and learned from Emily Parks over many years now. Emily's company, Organize for Success, helps multi-passionate business owners and executives bring harmony to all the layers of their lives, from work to side projects, from friends and family to hobbies, community, and beyond. With Emily's help, you too can make every minute matter. She helps you determine what earns your time and how to efficiently accomplish what matters. One of the many things I love about Emily is that she does not impose her will on her clients. She listens to them. That way she can better help them cultivate the lives they want to live. You can set up a complimentary call with Emily today by visiting organizeforsuccess.com. That's organize, F-O-R, success.com.
Welcome back to This Week in College Football with David Glenn, brought to you by the North Carolina Port Council here on the North Carolina Sports Network. I'm Chris F. All right, DG, time to dive into our National College Football Week 1 look ahead. It's brought to you by our great friends at XL Moving and Storage, a family-owned Allied Van Lines partner here in North Carolina with 25 years of award-winning experience that can help you with your move to North Carolina, within North Carolina, away from North Carolina, or even internationally, while also assisting with your storage needs. Learn more at excelms.com. That's XL Moving and Storage. All right, there are 3 top 25 versus top 25 matchups on the Week 1 college football season. Let's dive right into these, and you can actually sit on the couch and watch the triple header Saturday on ABC if you want to. Number 14 Clemson, number 1 Georgia from Mercedes-Benz Stadium, noon Saturday in Atlanta.
Yeah, I think obviously it's a brutally difficult opener for Dabo Swinney, who even has some critics after 2 national championships with the Tigers because they haven't been quite as good these last couple of years. On the upside, the Tigers are loaded across this depth chart. Barrett Carter and Wade Woodaz at linebacker, Peter Woods on the defensive line, R.J. Mickens at safety, Phil Maffa, one of our interviewees at the ACC kickoff event. He's going to get a ton of carries and receptions at running back. Tyler Brown's a talented young wideout. Jake Briningstool's one of the better tight ends in the league. They have a very good offensive line. The challenge, of course, is that Georgia has dudes, and I won't list all of the Bulldogs dudes, but they're preseason number 1 for a lot of different reasons. And it doesn't always come down to quarterback, but here's one way to put this matchup on Saturday at noon in Atlanta. Carson Beck is the number 1 quarterback on NFL scouts boards for the 2025 NFL draft. And viewed through a different lens, he's viewed by many as the number 1 returning college quarterback at this level. He's going against Cade Klubnik, who Dabo Swinney has been incredibly loyal to since signing him out of high school. He's actually, Cade Klubnik, one of the few starting quarterbacks in the ACC who is a homegrown guy in the sense that the same program signed him out of high school, developed him. He worked his way up the depth chart. He's the multi-year starter now for the Tigers. Cade Klubnik showed a lot of improvement last year, especially late, but nobody would put Cade Klubnik yet anywhere near the class of a Carson Beck. The Tigers, at a minimum, will need the best version of Cade Klubnik to have a chance of upsetting the Bulldogs in Atlanta. Nothing wrong with the Clemson depth chart. It might be the best in the ACC, but that team on the other sideline is really well coached, really talented, and that's why the Bulldogs are the favorite, not on their home field, but in their home state.
Saturday, 3:30 in the Swamp. Number 19 Miami visits Florida, another ABC game.
Yeah, this is more of a toss-up game in the eyes of the boys in Las Vegas. But let me just say that Miami's talent level is for real. Their new quarterback from Washington State, Cam Ward, was voted the ACC preseason player of the year. They have one of the best defensive ends in the league in Reuben Bain Jr. They have one of the best incoming defensive ends from the transfer portal, a guy named Elijah Alston from Marshall. They have more Pac-12 transplants in the form, for example, of a star running back, Damian Martinez, who was all Pac-12 at Oregon State last year. They also have their own quality running backs returning, a guy like Mark Fletcher, for example. They're loaded at wide receiver with Xavier Restrepo, Jacoby George, Samuel Brown, and others. They have a lot of good players on defense back. They have a promising offensive line. I know it feels like we've been saying this might be the Miami Hurricanes year in the ACC for most of the last 20 years running since they joined this league. And remember, they haven't won an ACC title yet, nor have they even come close. But I do think under Mario Cristobal, he's been there a while now, this is his breakthrough year. And I don't know if it'll end up in an ACC championship game, but I think the Canes are good enough to go to Gainesville and beat Florida and come away with a win on Saturday afternoon.
All right, the primetime game on Saturday night, ABC 7:30. A lot of intrigue here. Number 7 Notre Dame at number 20 Texas A&M. There's a lot of former Duke storylines going on in this game too, DG.
So true. Now, Chris, if you ever get fired by the North Carolina Sports Network, I just want to picture you and your family on a yacht in the Caribbean somewhere, having a lot of fun, eating caviar or whatever your favorite taste is. Why do I bring that up? Just a quick reference. I used to joke on my statewide show that one of my dreams was getting fired and receiving a large buyout. As it turned out, I got fired and received a small buyout. But I bring this up because the former Florida State coach who got fired at Texas A&M last November, Jimbo Fisher, he is enjoying, as we speak, the largest buyout in the history of college sports. It was more than $77 million being paid not to coach, not to broadcast Chris, not to host This Week in College Football. Anyway, you're right about those other angles. Now it is Mike Elko's turn at Texas A&M after that impressive 2-year run with the Duke Blue Devils. Just as he inherited, by the way, Elko, a quality quarterback at Duke in Riley Leonard. Now Elko inherits a quality quarterback at Texas A&M, a guy named Connor Wigman, who's also on the NFL's radar. And meanwhile, Elko is going against the guy that was just a starting quarterback at Duke, Riley Leonard. Notre Dame has Leonard as its new starter under third-year head coach Marcus Freeman, who I want to remind people, the Fighting Irish went 9-4 in the first full year under Marcus Freeman, 10-3 last year. So this is year 3 for him, and that's a breakthrough year for a lot of coaches. Think of a Brent Key and what he just did at Georgia Tech with that big win in Ireland over Florida State that we'll get to in a minute. Marcus Freeman seems to have the Irish on the upswing. Mike Elko inherited talent, but also some dysfunction in College Station. So the Irish definitely have the expanded college football playoff on their minds this year as the preseason number 7 team in the nation. The Aggies fans probably view Texas A&M that way as well, but I wouldn't be surprised if it takes Mike Elko at least a little longer to fulfill those sorts of dreams there.
All right, one more time out to burn. We'll have more of This Week in College Football with David Glenn, brought to you by the North Carolina Port Council, coming up right here on the North Carolina Sports Network.
The Original Salt Works has become a legendary breakfast, brunch, and lunch place in Wilmington for both locals and out-of-town visitors over the last 50-plus years. Our good friend Bob Hubbard owns the place, but he's also the one cooking your food and often roaming the dining room to greet you with a smile and to make sure your visit is a great one. Bob has been running the show at this unique roadside diner for more than 20 years now, and he and his friendly, hardworking staff aim to treat you like one of their own. Try Bob's homemade omelets or special recipe grits for breakfast or his legendary cheeseburgers for lunch. The Original Salt Works, your breakfast and lunch choice on Oleander Drive in Wilmington.
Welcome back to This Week in College Football with David Glenn, brought to you by the North Carolina Port Council. I'm Chris Edwards. And while the focus of This Week in College Football will always be a forward-looking one as often as possible, we will take a glance back at the previous weekend in college football because, in part, it's important to look at trends and angles that intrigue us and unique observations from DG, maybe historical perspective as well from a guy who's been doing it for more than 3 decades. So, DG, with that thought in mind, we bring you our quick glance back to Week 0, brought to you by our great friends at Jimmy's Bar and King Neptune Restaurant in Wrightsville Beach. Jimmy's has a full bar, nightly drink specials, live music, 365 days a year. Now, and right next door, you can go to King Neptune. They're becoming one of the best restaurants in the entire greater Wilmington area. So keep up with Jimmy's on Facebook and learn more about King Neptune Restaurant at neptuneswb.com. All right. Not a lot of action in Week 0, but the biggest game was that international one, Georgia Tech's East Campus out there in Dublin, Ireland, where the Yellow Jackets got the big win over number 10 Florida State, who was the meatiest pick to win the ACC, 24-21 Jackets on a last-second field goal in Dublin. First off, biggest takeaway or two for the Yellow Jackets?
Yeah, I mentioned Brent Key a moment ago. That's the Yellow Jackets head coach. He was that interim coach a few years ago, remember? Started building them in the right direction. But this is a guy who has culture on his mind. And it's easy to forget, prior to the turn of the century, Brent Key was a Georgia Tech player, and Brent Key was an all-ACC offensive lineman. It is not mere coincidence that he is building on the shoulders of that offensive line, which to me was the star of the game in Ireland. I don't know if that makes me a football geek. I respect Haynes King, who's one of the best dual threat quarterbacks in the ACC. In fact, I asked all 17 ACC head coaches in Charlotte earlier this year to talk about their quarterbacks. Not all of them wanted to go all the way out on the limb where they say, my guy is the best in the ACC. Brent Key of Georgia Tech was the one who did say that. In fact, he said, hands down, Haynes King is the best quarterback in the ACC and one of the best in the country. Mario Cristobal at Miami went almost that far in praising his incoming transfer, Cam Ward. Others were very complimentary of their QBs, but for internal or publicity reasons, maybe just didn't want to publicly go out on the limb and just make that same sort of bold claim. But I bring that up because we all know Haynes King can be a great quarterback. He was good against Florida State. And as Brent Key says, Haynes King doesn't care about the numbers. He's unselfish. He doesn't care who gets the credit. It's okay if he throws a lot. It's okay if he throws a little. He didn't throw a lot against Florida State. The bottom line is Georgia Tech won. And it wasn't just because of good Haynes King at quarterback, good Jamal Haynes, who's a heck of a running back. It was a great offensive line performance. If you watch Florida State's 12 games prior to that postseason bowl debacle against Georgia, in the 12-0 Seminoles start, there was nobody who pushed them around at the line of scrimmage. Didn't happen. There's some personnel changes, and then you just have to give, at Florida State, but you have to give Georgia Tech credit. Weston Franklin's one of the best centers in this league. Both of their tackles at Georgia Tech are very experienced. They even share time at left tackle. Their left guard, Joe Fusili, is an all-ACC caliber guy, and none of this is coincidence. Georgia Tech went into this game not thinking that they could steamroll a talented Florida State defense, but that they could win the battle in the trenches against Florida State, which, again, just didn't happen last year prior to the Georgia Bowl debacle. That's a credit to what Brent Key has built over multiple years. It's a sign of what can happen when you get to the point where, unlike our UNC example earlier and all that inexperience, when you have a lot of returning starters, when you have a lot of old dudes with 3 and 4 years of experience starting on the offensive line, it's not sexy to talk about the offensive line. And again, Tech's receivers, quarterback, running back, defense, they were all good. It was a team effort. Aiden Burr had to kick that game-winning field goal for this to even be the story that it became. But it started with the offensive line. That is an absolutely essential takeaway for the Yellow Jackets, because when you're good on the offensive line, you're probably going to be in every game that you play. I don't know if the Yellow Jackets are good enough to win the ACC title or make a trip to the ACC title game, but they're certainly off on the right foot. And if they stay healthy on that offensive line and with those skill players I mentioned, they're going to be an awfully hard team to beat the rest of the way.
What do you take away from the game from a Florida State perspective, knowing it's week 0 and there's still a lot of football left?
I still think the Seminoles are extremely talented, but I was worried from their perspective that some of the highest end players that they lost at wide receiver, at running back, and otherwise were replaced by good guys, but not automatically elite guys, right? Quarterback, Jordan Travis was the ACC Player of the Year. DJ Uiagalelei is the guy who drove Clemson fans nuts for 2 years as the Tigers starter because of his roller coaster type performance while playing for the Clemson Tigers. Now, he did have a breakthrough of sorts at Oregon State last year, better version of himself, grew up a lot, but that's against Pac-12 competition, which is not always known for its super stout defense. Florida State seemed afraid to ask DJ Uiagalelei to make many passes downfield until they got into emergency mode over in Dublin. Florida State, Mike Norvell probably thought his team was good enough to win without asking DJ Uiagalelei to do what's not his greatest strength, just repeatedly making plays down the field. Uiagalelei seems like he doesn't want to run as much as he has at times early in his career, which is okay. But if you do that, you better be more accurate with your arm. You better scare defenses more with your downfield throwing ability. It's not just the quarterback. Again, Florida State has gone. They still have a great offensive line, by the way. They and Georgia Tech are two of the best offensive lines in the ACC, period. And that's going to help both of them the rest of the way, health permitting. But they need to find stars at wideout and running back, and they need to ask their quarterback to be a star at least occasionally, or they're going to take a significant step back offensively this year at Florida State.
All right, and as we wrap up, we did not talk about all 17 ACC teams today, but there's got to be a theme or two that you're going to be watching league-wide from coast to coast as we look at week one of the college football season.
Yeah, Chris, this one's quarterback-centric again, and I don't want to beat that dead horse too much, but it matters. And here's the reality in the Atlantic Coast Conference this year, and to a degree across the great state of North Carolina that we love so much. No matter what quarterback you or I think is the best in the ACC, I just want you to hear some realities quickly about even the highest profile, most promising, most proven ACC quarterbacks. Get ready for this. Miami's QB, Washington State transfer Cam Ward, is considered an NFL prospect, was named the preseason player of the year, ... But the same guy, Cam Ward, sounds great, right? He had a losing record during his 2 seasons in the Pac-12, which again is not a league known for its stout defense. He was 12 wins and 13 losses for the Washington State Cougars. Might some of those huge numbers at Washington State that caught the NFL's attention have been, we're losing a lot, we're trailing a lot, we're playing catch up in the pass-happy Pac-12? Does that kind of tilt the numbers in a way that makes Cam Ward look even better than he actually is? We'll see. I don't claim to know all the answers to these questions, but for example, Haynes King, Brent Pry, Georgia Tech, Brent Pry, Virginia Tech, Brent Key, Georgia Tech. Sorry about that. Haynes King of Georgia Tech, called by Brent Key, hands down the best QB in the ACC. He did finish last season behind only the NFL-bound North Carolina quarterback Drake May in total offense. That sounds great. Again, ... Haynes King also threw more interceptions than any Power 5 signal caller in 2023. For every superlative, there is a cause for concern. Preston Stone of SMU. He is Pro Football Focus's top-ranked ACC quarterback. He led the Mustangs, remember, to the American Athletic Conference title last season, including undefeated in-conference play. ... All that sounds good. Preston Stone also has started for only 1 season. He broke his leg at the end of last year, and he's been sharing snaps with his backup, Kevin Jennings, both in preseason practice and in their come-from-behind win in Week 0 at Nevada. Go down the list. We mentioned DJ Uyangale's ups and downs. Grayson McCall of NC State, as we get out of here. Everybody has heard repeatedly that the Coastal Carolina transfer won 3 straight Sun Belt Conference Player of the Year honors for the Chanticleers. He threw for more than 10,000 career passing yards prior to arriving for the Wolfpack in Raleigh. ... The same guy, Grayson McCall, is coming off by far the worst season of his college career. He was only 4-3 as a starter last year after having to learn a new offense. He had only 10 touchdown passes against 6 interceptions for the Chanticleers last year. Again, it was the worst of his 4 seasons playing at Coastal Carolina. That paints a little bit of a different picture. And finally, the 6th guy in Pro Football Focus's top 6 ACC starting quarterbacks, Kyron Drones of Virginia Tech. It's the same deal. On the one hand, you can say he's one of only 7 returning starters in the ACC. It's always good to have continuity, your same offensive coordinator. Most ACC teams have an offensive coordinator and a starting quarterback who are just getting to know each other for the first time in the 2024 calendar year. So Kyron Drones, we know he's a great dual threat quarterback, along with like a Haynes King of Georgia Tech or a Thomas Castellanos at Boston College. We know that he can do both, throw and run. However, like a Castellanos at Boston College, Kyron Drones, even the Pro Football Focus guys will emphasize it. He just hasn't shown that he could be a consistently reliable pocket passer, as many other great things as he does for the Hokies and already has done at Virginia Tech. Again, There's a lot of promising QBs, even some proven QBs, but there are some fair question marks surrounding every one of them. There is a chance this year in this league that the guy we thought might be the 7th best in the ACC is going to be 1st, 2nd, or 3rd. And there's a chance somebody we thought was top 5 is going to end up in the middle of the pack. It involves your surrounding cast, of course. It involves the difficulty of your schedule. It involves good health and good luck around you. It involves, the caliber of each week's opposition. But that unpredictability from 1 through 17 ACC starting quarterbacks, from 1 through 7 state of North Carolina starting quarterbacks, it's more of a guessing game than it usually is. That both makes coaches nervous and more fun headlines for the media and hopefully the fans out there as well.
We're going to start to answer some of those questions coming up later this week, and we look forward to bringing it to you all season long on This Week in College Football with David Glenn. A huge thank you to the North Carolina Port Council for being the founding partner of the North Carolina Sports Network. We're also so thrilled to welcome Atlantic Tire and Service, now with 6 locations in the Triangle, as our newest sponsor. Don't forget, DG and his staff are posting daily articles at our fastest growing website, ncsportsnetwork.com, which also has direct links on the homepage right here to the YouTube channel that you're watching right now. The wide variety of places you can get on-demand podcast, audio, video, this show and the David Glenn Show, along with all of our other offerings, and updates on year 2 of our Old North State Tailgate and Traveling Sports Circus, which will be visiting both North Carolina Central and Appalachian State just in the month of September. So head over there again, ncsportsnetwork.com, to get your fix of all the great work that we're doing here. For David Glenn, I'm Chris Edwards. Thanks again for joining us on This Week in College Football with David Glenn right here on the North Carolina Sports Network.